Hi Cyber Class, it's Professor Opterbeck. I'm just touching base at the end of week 1 and the beginning of week 2. So good job with week 1. Everybody did well on the quiz, and I enjoyed reading through all of your discussion posts, and you had some really good conversations about the nature of cyberspace, the nature of the internet. And I always start this course off with a unit or two on that question, and people sometimes wonder, kind of how is this connected? But when we're talking about cybersecurity, we're really fundamentally talking about governance in cyberspace. And as you saw from the materials we looked at last week, that was a really interesting question, a difficult question in the dawn of the internet era in the middle 1990s, late 90s, early 2000s. And really the kind of answers that were given are sort of still with us. Cyberspace is really something exceptional, and ordinary law doesn't really apply. Cyberspace is not exceptional at all. It's the law of the horse. Ordinary law applies. And then there are a whole variety of middle positions, which I think these days most people are somewhere in some kind of middle position. But the question of cyber crime, which we're starting to look at this week, resurfaces all of those issues. I did a video for you to look at, kind of giving some highlights on the Verizon DIBR report and the IBM cost of a data breach report. And one thing you should see there is that this is a global phenomenon. There are, Russian-based, Chinese-based, North Korean-based organized crime groups that are affecting cybersecurity in the US and around the world. I just did a little response to a reporter on a attack that involves a third-party vendor to the financial services industry. And it's a widespread thing now in life insurance, other insurers, and financial services companies that all use this vendor and now are being hit with this ransomware because of a zero-day exploit in the vendor software. And the group behind the attacks is a Russian-based organized crime group. Very sophisticated. So, it raises these questions about borders and what can law do, and in particular, starting this week, what can criminal law do? Because of course, an attack like that, a ransomware attack or exfiltration of data, is a crime, and the company that is affected, that is holding this data, is a victim of a crime. Now, of course, there are also individuals who are victims. So the customers of that company, or the patients, if it's a healthcare provider, whose individual information is taken and used in some way, are victims as well. So you really have at least two victims. One of the big questions in cybersecurity is, can criminal law do anything to deter or remedy the initial, criminal attack? And that's what we're going to really look at starting this week. And then later on in the semester, we'll look at, what about the individual, you or I, whose credit card data, for example, is exfiltrated? Do we have a remedy? Now, we're not likely to have a viable remedy against the criminal. You're not going to sue a Russian organized crime gang and get any kind of result from that. But you might sue, your healthcare provider or your life insurance company from your data getting taken. So we've got a bunch of different things in the chain. Now, one of the challenging questions is the nature and scope of cybercrime law, and when should it apply, and to whom should it apply? When should something be considered criminal, and when should something really be considered private law and civil? And that's actually the other video that I have for you to look at, as well as some of the reading material. Please do pay attention to that encyclopedia article on theories of, or Oxford Handbook article on theories of criminalization, because that's a big part of our theme for this week. When is something a crime or when it is not? Please also pay attention to the article of mine that I assigned, and all you need to do is read part 2, but in that I give kind of a survey of how I see the cybercrime landscape, and I think that'll be helpful for you for framing. Of course, read everything. A lot of the materials that I'm giving you is kind of background on the nature and the scope of the problem. Our discussion piece for this week comes from the case of Aaron Swartz, and you'll read a little bit about that if you don't know about it. in the materials that I assigned, but it was a very high profile, very sad incident. There are a lot of questions about exactly what led to Aaron Swartz's untimely death and the prosecution and other things involving his conduct. So think about that a little bit, and I look forward to seeing your discussions online.